Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon so that you never miss any video lesson from RAU'S IAS Study Circle.
Hello and welcome to Daily News Simplified, an analysis of the Hindu newspaper from UPSC perspective.
Today we will discuss the daily edition of the Hindu newspaper dated 29th April 2022, and the articles that we will discuss today are displayed on your screen. But before starting today's discussion, we have an announcement to make.
So prelims is just a month away and only 2.5% aspirants will qualify the prelims examination. So how to be a part of these 2.5% aspirants and how to have a short way of clearing the prelims examination. Of course, it is the knowledge and the understanding of the syllabus, but it is the testing which is going to play a very crucial part in qualifying the prelims examination. And when such testing is at an all India level amongst the most serious aspirants, that is the litmus test of your preparation. So to assess your preparation amongst the most serious aspirants and feel the competition before the real prelims examination, like every year we have come up with the Pareekshan test. So how is the Pareekshan test going to help you in fine-tuning your preparation from now on till the real prelims examination? First, it will give you the all India ranking to understand your level of preparation amongst the most serious aspirants. Second, it will help you in understanding your weaknesses and strengths. And from thereupon, you can devise a strategy for yourself for the next 30 days to be sure of qualifying the prelims examination. So this Pareekshan test is scheduled on this weekend from Saturday till Monday. That is from 30th of April till 2nd of May. And this test will be followed by a live discussion on 3rd of May, which will be very important for you to analyze what kind of strategy you should pursue till this prelims examination. So register on the ELEARN platform to appear in this test in large numbers.
This article on page number 6 is regarding the provision of death penalty or capital punishment in India's criminal justice system. In this regard, there has been debate regarding the abolition of death penalty as a punishment for crimes in India. However, the constitutional validity of the death penalty has been upheld by the Supreme Court in one of the famous judgments that is known as the Singh judgment. In this, it has upheld the constitutional validity of the death penalty, and at the same time it has provided for a doctrine by the name rarest of the rare case doctrine, so that the provisions of the death penalty are not misused or are not used in an inappropriate manner. And that is why this debate regarding the abolition or existence of death penalty in India's criminal justice system becomes important for us from the mains examination perspective. If you look at the previous year question papers in the General Studies paper 2, UPSC has asked question in the mains examination of 2014 regarding instances of president's delay in commuting the death sentence, which has come under the public debate as a denial of justice. So this was also seen as one of the arguments against the death penalty in India, because the process of death penalty and awarding of the death penalty in reality is a very long drawn process. This is because first the trial courts provide for death penalty, then this trial court's verdict is appealed in the high courts. From there on, it is appealed in the Supreme Court, and then the person approaches the president for the mercy petition. And even then, the president keeps on delaying the commuting of such death penalty. And that is why such a big delay in the instances of commuting of death sentences by the president has come under the debate and was in the debate back in 2014, and it is still an important part of debate as far as the death penalty is concerned. And that is why it was asked in the mains examination that should there be a time specified for the president to accept or reject such petitions. Analyze. In this context, we are going to look at the larger debate about the death penalty, that is, what are the arguments in favor of and what are the arguments against the provision of death penalty in the criminal justice system. After that, we'll look at what was provided for in the Singh verdict and what exactly is meant by this rarest of the rare doctrine. And after that, we'll look at a report that was provided by retired Justice of Supreme Court A.P. Shah and what were the observations of this report on the death penalty, and what was the conclusion that was provided by this report related to the issue of death penalty in India's criminal justice system. Now, if you look at the arguments in favor of and against the capital punishment or death penalty, the first argument that is provided in favor of the death penalty is that the death penalty's provisions are based on the deterrent theory of punishment. Now, the deterrent theory simply provides that if a punishment is provided to a convict, it can become an example for the society so that in the future not many people will try to commit such crimes, and that is why it is going to create a kind of deterrence and it will instill the fear of punishment, including death, among the wrongdoers in the society. So this is one of the arguments in favor of capital punishment, because this is the most severe punishment that can be inflicted upon a convict. The second argument in favor of capital punishment or the death penalty is the moral argument. And keeping such a person alive has been said to be morally wrong for the society. This is because if somebody has conducted a heinous crime and if that person is not awarded death penalty and is kept alive, there can be future potential victims because of this person's tendency to commit the crimes. And that is why another argument in favor of the capital punishment is the moral argument. That is, keeping an accused of the heinous crimes alive at the cost of lives of number of citizens or potential victims in the society is morally wrong. Further, in case of India, it has been argued that death penalty in India is in accordance with the Article 21. That is, the life and liberty of a person can be only taken based on the procedure established by the law. And this provision has been upheld by the Singh verdict of the Supreme Court also. In this case, the use of death penalty is also rare in case of India because the Singh verdict provided for rarest of the rare doctrine, and that is why such usage of death penalty on a very low scale provides that the death penalty should not be abolished altogether and it should be used only for rarest of the rare cases. Further, in case of India, the death penalty allows for right to appeal. That is, in case of any injustice that is conducted by the trial courts, there is provision for right to appeal for the accused or the convicted. In this case, the Indian laws and the constitution allow the appeal against the decisions of the High Court and even the Supreme Court. And Article 72 allows the convict to appeal the decision of the Supreme Court to the President of India if the death sentence has been awarded. So there is a clear-cut sequence in which a person who feels that injustice has been conducted by the trial courts at the lower level, that person can approach the judiciary at the higher level and also can approach the President for the mercy petition. So these are the safeguards or the arguments that are provided in favor of capital punishment or death penalty in India. However, there are arguments against the capital punishment also. Now, if we look at the arguments against the capital punishment or the death penalty, it has been provided that the provision of death penalty in a jurisprudence ensures retribution by the state itself. Now, this simply means that the retribution or the vengeance kind of justice is the lowest form of justice. This is because such kind of justice based on vengeance is at times provided by societies which do not have rule of law. And in case of death penalty that is provided in the jurisprudence or the criminal justice system, it ensures retribution by the state itself. And it is generally argued that the retribution by the state is immoral and it is a form of vengeance by the state itself on the convict. The second argument against the capital punishment is based on the United Nations Commission on the Human Rights' recommendation. And it has provided or called upon the countries not to impose death penalty on those persons who are suffering from any form of mental disorder or to execute any such person. Further, it does not help in reducing or deterring heinous crimes in the country. That is, even after the existence of death penalty for such a long period of time, the crime rate in the society has not dropped. This means that the deterrence effect of the death penalty is simply not that effective. And the last argument against the capital punishment is that there is large time gap between the award of the death penalty and the ultimate execution of the death penalty. And this itself amounts to torture and punishment to the convict. So these are some of the arguments in favor and these are some of the arguments against the capital punishment. Now, after looking at some of the arguments against and in favor of the death penalty and capital punishment, let us look at the global status of death penalty across the countries. In this regard, it has been said that around 104 countries have completely abolished death penalty, whereas 29 other countries have abolished it de facto. That is, although provisions related to death penalty are available in their criminal justice system. However, these countries have not executed any person in the last 10 years. This shows that globally also the trend is that the countries are not resorting to death penalty. And that is why this is also one of the arguments that the death penalty should be abolished. However, in case of India, if you look at the usage of death penalty as a means of punishment, the Supreme Court of India has safeguarded the misuse of award of death penalty through the Bachchan Singh versus State of Punjab case. In this case, the Supreme Court provided for rarest of the rare doctrine, and this is seen as a safeguard against the misuse of the provisions of the death penalty. Now, if you look at the case of death penalty, it is awarded as the severest form of punishment to any convict. However, there are chances that a person might be wrongly prosecuted, and in that case, this might be a kind of injustice that cannot be reversed if the person is executed under the provisions of death penalty. And that is why this rarest of the rare doctrine sometimes acts as a safeguard against such wrong award of death penalty at times because of loopholes in the investigation or prosecution, and finally the award of punishment. So in this regard, the Supreme Court has upheld the constitutional validity of the death penalty. However, it has laid down the principle that death penalty must be awarded only in the rarest of the rare cases. However, one issue with this judgment of the Supreme Court is that the scope of the phrase rarest of the rare has been left undefined by the Supreme Court itself. Further, in this regard, the court said that the death penalty is a lawful infliction of death by the state as a punishment for wrongful and heinous crimes committed by the accused. So on the one hand, the Supreme Court has upheld the provision of death penalty in the India's criminal justice system. On the other hand, it has provided safeguard in the form of the rarest of the rare doctrine. So what exactly is provided for in the rarest of the rare doctrine, or what are the interpretations based on various Supreme Court judgments about this rarest of the rare doctrine? In this regard, various Supreme Court judgments have provided that the extreme step of imposing death penalty need not be imposed except in cases of extreme culpability. That is, if the crime that has been committed is of extreme nature, if the murder or any kind of crime has been committed in cold blood, then only such cases qualify for the award of death penalty. Further, before awarding the capital punishment, the circumstances of the offender should also be accounted for. That is, what is the background and what were the conditions in which the crime was committed. Further, the Supreme Court has provided that life imprisonment is a rule and death sentence is an exception. In other words, the death sentence should only be imposed in cases where the life imprisonment proves to be altogether insufficient punishment, giving regard to accurate conditions of the crime. Thus, the Supreme Court has provided that life imprisonment should act as a rule. However, death penalty should only be used in exceptional circumstances. And finally, the Supreme Court has said that a balance sheet of all the aggravating and mitigating circumstances need to be drawn up and full weightage must be given to mitigating circumstances so that a balance between both can be struck. Now, after understanding the rarest of the rare doctrine that has been provided for by the Supreme Court in the Bachchan Singh case, let us look at the recommendations that have been provided by the Law Commission on the death penalty and the analysis that has been provided by the Law Commission related to death penalty. In this regard, while analyzing the death penalty and its various issues, the report observed that death penalty does not serve as a deterrence. That was also one of the arguments against the provisions of death penalty. In this regard, the Law Commission observed that the death penalty does not serve the societal goal of deterrence any more than life imprisonment, because even after the existence of death penalty, the crime in the society has not reduced, rather it is increasing day by day. Second argument against the death penalty that was provided by the Law Commission was that retribution versus vengeance. That is, the notion of eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth has no place in our constitutionally mediated criminal justice system. Third argument that was provided by the Law Commission against the death penalty was that such kind of provisions of death penalty stand against the restorative and the reformative justice that is provided for in the civilized societies. In this regard, the provisions of death penalty in a criminal justice system presumes that a convict cannot be rehabilitated or reformed and the behavior of the convict cannot be changed. And that is why this is also another argument against the provisions of death penalty. That is, the restorative and the rehabilitative aspects of the justice are forgotten, through which the accused behavior can be changed, and this has been seen to be one of the important aspects of the justice system. Further, the Law Commission argued that the reliance on death penalty diverts attention from other problems which are ailing the criminal justice system. And we all are aware that the criminal justice system already suffers from various loopholes like poor investigation, crime prevention, and the rights of the victims of the crime. Also, on the part of judiciary, there is already a delay in the imparting of the justice, and that is sometimes said that the justice delayed is justice denied. Further, the Law Commission argued that there is a need for victim compensation schemes, and also there is a need for effective investigation and prosecution by the state. This is because at times the investigation and the prosecution by the state is not that effective, and this can lead to misuse of the provisions of the death penalty at times. Further, concerns have been expressed by the Supreme Court on arbitrary sentencing in the death penalty cases, and that is why this is also one of the arguments against the imposition of death penalty as understood by the Law Commission of India. And there have been erroneous imposition of death penalty at times. Further, it has been observed by the Law Commission that death sentence has been disproportionately awarded to people belonging to vulnerable section or socially and economically marginalized sections of the society. Also, the Law Commission observed that there has been considerable delay that is faced by the death row convicts. And finally, the Law Commission observed that death penalty acts as a kind of double punishment because the death row phenomena is compounded by degrading and oppressive effects of conditions of the imprisonment imposed on the convict, including solitary confinement and harsh prison conditions. And also, we are aware that the time gap between the award of the death penalty and the actual execution of the death penalty is a very long period of time. And this long period of time under which the convict remains in the prisons amounts to a kind of mental torture, or you can say that it amounts to double punishment. However, while concluding the report on death penalty, the Law Commission recommended that the death penalty should be abolished for all the crimes other than the crimes related to terrorism or those offences which amount to waging war against the national security or the state itself. So only in such cases the death penalty should be awarded, and for all other crimes the death penalty should be abolished. So the Law Commission has clearly provided various arguments against the provision of death penalty, and it has provided that the death penalty should be abolished altogether except for crimes related to terrorism and waging of war against the state itself. Further, Supreme Court had provided the rarest of the rare doctrine in order to safeguard the misuse of the provisions of the death penalty. And already globally, many countries have abolished the provision of death penalty, and death penalty as a deterrent in the society has not been very effective. And that is why some of the arguments have been forwarded against the death penalty and some of the arguments have been forwarded in favor of the death penalty, and we have looked at both the sides of the coin. With this, let's take up the next news article now. This article on page number 7 is related to the debate regarding the subsidies that are provided by the Government of India in the fields like food, fertilizer, electricity, water, railway passenger fares, etc. And there has been a considerable debate that should the government spend more on the subsidies or should it do away with the subsidies altogether. Now, this is mainly because when the government starts spending in the form of subsidies, its scope of spending on capital expenditure for the development of capital assets, which is important for the growth of the economy, gets arrested. And that is why some have argued against the provisions of the subsidies and have provided that rather than providing subsidies, the government should focus more on the capital expenditure in order to boost the economic growth. However, if we look at the Indian society, we are aware that there are various vulnerable sections and not many of them can afford the market competition, and that is why government provides support in the form of subsidies, and that has also been one of the major planks of the Government of India for poverty alleviation. So let us look at the impact or the problems with the subsidy regime in India, or what are the issues and how it is affecting the various sectors of Indian economy. And this can be a very important aspect for us in the General Studies paper 3 in the economic development section. Already, if you look at the mains examination of 2015, the question was asked which read, in what way could the replacement of price subsidy with direct benefit transfer change the scenario of subsidies in India? Discuss. So let us look at the various problems with the subsidy regime and how it is impacting different sectors of the Indian economy. So if we try to understand the problems with the subsidy regime, the first problem with the subsidy regime is that the price subsidies are considered as regressive in nature. Now, price subsidies are set up by the Government of India or various governments at the state level in the fields like electricity, fertilizers, and the minimum support price for the agricultural procurement. Now, the issue with such price subsidies is that these subsidies benefit the richer households more as compared to the poor households, and that is why they are considered to be regressive in nature. Now, we are all aware that the subsidies are intended to provide support to the poor households and not to the richer households who can afford these things. Now, for example, the government is providing a universal subsidy in the field of electricity. Now, we all are aware that the richer households consume more amount of electricity as compared to the poor households. And as such, these households are benefiting more from the subsidy regime that has been created in the field of electricity. And that is why it is said that the subsidies benefit richer households more as compared to the poor households, which are actually the intended beneficiaries. Similar is the case with minimum support price. Now, the minimum support price is mainly intended to provide support to the marginal and the smaller farmers. However, the main beneficiaries of the minimum support price regime are the farmers who have large land holdings or the rich farmers. That is why the price subsidies that are universal in nature are seen to be regressive because they benefit the richer households more as compared to the poor households. Second issue with the subsidy regime is that there are leakages and instances of corruption. In this regard, there are errors like inclusion or exclusion errors. Now, let's say the government of India has created a scheme for the benefit of the poor section of the society. However, the biggest question is how to identify these poor sections of the society. And we all are aware that the government of India had created the below poverty line in this regard. However, at times what was seen was that people who were in the richer sections were also included in the BPL category. So the issue here is that how to ascertain that a person belongs to a BPL or not, and at times on the ground level when such schemes are implemented, there are these errors which are known as inclusion and the exclusion errors. And also there will be instances where the intended poor beneficiary who might fall in this below poverty line regime will be excluded from the actual beneficiary list. So there are errors related to inclusion as well as exclusion. And then there are issues related to duplicate and ghost beneficiaries. Also, there is presence of middlemen and poor administrative efficiency, which all impact the efficacy of the subsidy regime. Now, after this, let us try and understand how does the subsidies impact different sectors of the Indian economy. First in this regard is the agriculture sector and how it is impacting the agriculture sector itself. Now, in the agriculture sector, we all are aware that the government of India provides minimum support price for the wheat and the rice and various other crops. Now, in this regard, the decisions related to the minimum support price in the field of agriculture are sometimes decided based on political populism. Now, what this does is that it encourages the production of water-intensive crops at times like rice, etc. And because of the announcement of the minimum support price by the government of India for a few crops, it discourages agricultural diversification. That is, the farmers, when they are assured of a fixed price because of the procurement by the government under the MSP regime related to only few crops, these farmers always try to grow the crops which have been provided for in the MSP regime. And that is why the wheat and the rice production is exorbitantly high in India. However, as compared to rice and the wheat, the other important crops which are important for India's agriculture sector like oilseeds and pulses have taken a back seat. And we are dependent upon the imports of the oilseeds and the pulses mainly because of lack of diversification on the part of farmers, which has in turn been because of the government's encouragement of MSP on only few crops like wheat and rice. Now, such lack of diversification of agriculture leads to demand-supply mismatch, and it also leads to lower price for those crops on which MSP has been announced. For example, in the market, if the farmer tries to sell his or her crop, the price for the rice and the wheat will be lower as compared to the MSP that has been set by the government at times. However, there is inflation in the other crops on which the MSP is not announced. For example, there has been inflation in case of pulses and oil seeds or eggs, etc. And that is why this leads to demand supply mismatch. And when there is demand supply mismatch, of course, it is going to lead to lower income levels for the farmers. So this is a vicious trap of the MSP regime that has been created for the agriculture sector, and how it inadvertently impacts the farming community itself. Now, besides the impact of the MSP regime on the farmer incomes and the inflation on the various agricultural commodities, there are other impacts also. For example, the Government of India's expenditure on the agriculture subsidies is around 8.2% of the agricultural GDP. However, the government's investment in the agriculture is only around 2.2% of the agricultural GDP. This clearly shows that the government is spending more on the subsidies as compared to infrastructure investment in the agriculture sector. And the issue here is that even when the government is spending more on the subsidy regime, these subsidies are not inclusive because they mainly benefit the rich farmers. Such subsidies are not environmentally sustainable because the farmers are resorting to more excessive water consuming crops. It is also leading to imbalanced fertilizer consumption and is ultimately leading to soil degradation. Further, such subsidy regimes create distortions. For example, free power leads to huge losses for the distribution companies of the electricity. Also, MSP leads to artificial scarcity of the food grains. And higher focus on the cultivation of water intensive crops is also there, and it leads to lack of diversification also. And at the same time, such over focus on the agriculture subsidies does not address the structural problems of the Indian agriculture, and also leads to lower investment in the agriculture by the government, or focus is less on the infrastructure investment by the Government of India in the field of agriculture. Besides agriculture, there are various other sectors which are also linked to the subsidy regimes or are impacted by the subsidy regimes. For example, farm loan waivers are announced by the governments at times. And these have an adverse impact on the credit culture, because when the loans are provided to the farmers, they hesitate to repay such loans because they expect that in the coming announcements by the government, the loans would be waived. And that is why it leads to a bad credit culture. And this leads to increase in the NPAs or the non-performing assets for the banking sectors, which are already under a huge stress. Further, because of the subsidies in the field of the electricity sector, it leads to huge losses for the distribution companies of the electricity, and it leads to poor financial position of these discoms. And because of this poor financial position of the distribution companies, these companies have led to increase in the non-performing assets in the banking sector. So in this regard, if you look at the power sector, subsidies provided on the electricity, which leads to poor financial position of the distribution companies and their inability to provide 24/7 electricity to the poor households. And if there is poor financial position of the distribution companies, they are unable to pay their money back to power generating companies, and it leads to higher non-performing assets for the banking sector. Similar is the case with railways, where the Government of India is providing subsidy in the case of passenger fares. However, the fares related to freight, which are important for the economy, are very high. So the cross-subsidization of the passenger fares by increasing the freight charges has led to higher operating ratio and lower profits for the Indian railways. And because of the higher operating ratio, there have been lower profits in the railway sector, and this has led to decreased capacity addition and modernization of the railways, and accordingly, it is further leading to higher freight rates or higher logistic costs, which is in turn leading to increased inflation because of the high cost of transportation. Also, the subsidy regimes lead to higher fiscal deficit because higher expenditure on the subsidies leads to higher fiscal deficit and lower capital expenditure. So in this scenario, what needs to be done? So in this case, it has been suggested that eliminating or phasing down the subsidies is neither feasible nor desirable unless they are accompanied by other forms of support to cushion the poor and the vulnerable. And that is why it has been highlighted that the JAM number trinity, that is the Jan Dhan Yojana, Aadhaar and the mobile numbers, should be able to offer this support in a targeted and less distortive way. That is why the direct benefit transfer scheme is sometimes seen to be an answer to more targeted subsidies which are less distortive in nature. With this, let's take up the next news article now. This editorial on page number 6 is related to Myanmar, and it is related to the internal politics of Myanmar. In this regard, you should know that Myanmar had witnessed a military coup in the last few years, and that has been a cause of concern for the international community, and that has also posed challenges for India's diplomacy. In this regard, the international community has been forcing India to take a stand on the military coup that has taken place in Myanmar and highlight the human rights abuses in case of Myanmar. However, Myanmar being one of the important neighboring countries of India in the northeastern part of India, India has tried to abstain from criticizing any internal political move of Myanmar in the view of importance that Myanmar has for India. So if you look at the map of Myanmar, it lies or borders with the northeastern states of India. And that is why Myanmar becomes very, very important for the security of the northeastern states of India. In this regard, if you look at the location of Myanmar, it acts as a bridge between the South Asia and the Southeast Asia. So these are the Southeast Asian countries including Thailand, Indonesia, etc. And Myanmar can act as a bridge between the South Asian countries, that is India, Pakistan, etc. and the Southeast Asian countries. Further, because the Myanmar borders the northeastern states, it can be a very important aspect for northeastern states' security because various insurgent groups that are responsible for insurgency in the northeastern states like Nagaland, etc. have been operating from the Myanmar's land territory. Also, China has been trying to increase its influence in the Myanmar, and that is why China is planning to work upon the China-Myanmar economic corridor so that it can have direct access to the Bay of Bengal or the Indian Ocean and it can bypass its Malacca dilemma. And further, because of the landlocked situation of the northeastern states of India and a narrow passage that connects these northeastern states to mainland India, India has been trying to develop various infrastructure projects including India-Myanmar-Thailand Trilateral Highway and Kaladan Multimodal Project in order to improve the connectivity situation in the northeastern states of India so that India can have an access into the northeastern states through the Bay of Bengal, Myanmar into northeastern states. So let us look at all these aspects regarding India-Myanmar relations and why Myanmar is important to India. In this regard, if you look at India's policy towards Myanmar, we all are aware that military coup has taken place in Myanmar few years back. In this regard, the international community has been urging India to take a stand on the internal politics of Myanmar, that is the military coup, and talk about the democratization of Myanmar. However, India has been taking a policy of non-interference in the internal politics since 1990s because previously also the Myanmar was under the military regime. And India has always supported the democratization of the Myanmar driven from within the country and not the one which has been imposed by the outside countries. Now this is important because this has allowed India the scope to engage with military and also the political parties if they are in power. That is, whoever comes to power in Myanmar, this has allowed India to engage with any one of them in order to meet its own interests. Secondly, the position of India regarding the military coup has been engagement rather than criticizing the military coup that has taken place in case of Myanmar. And India has been focusing on engaging rather than criticizing as the most practical approach to finding a solution. Further, focus of India has been on balancing the influence of China in the Myanmar. And we all are aware that China has been trying to develop the China-Myanmar economic corridor so that it can have access to Indian Ocean region and bypass its Malacca dilemma. Now, this is also a cause of concern because of the growing India-China tensions in the recent time. In this regard, India has been trying to improve its relations with Myanmar by various diplomatic moves. For example, India has taken an important step towards establishing its embassy in the Naypyidaw, which is the new capital of Myanmar, where previously India had its embassy in the Yangon, which was the former capital. Further, we all are aware that Myanmar is important for border security and development, and both these countries have collaborated in terms of border security so that the insurgent groups that operate into the states of northeastern India do not operate from the land territory of Myanmar. Also, India and Myanmar have been focusing on strategic infrastructure development where India has proposed build-up of a petroleum refinery in China, especially in order to compete with the Chinese presence in Myanmar. Also, India has been focusing on various infrastructure projects like the Sitwe port, as you can see in this map, and also the Kaladan multimodal project, which will provide access to Mizoram from the Bay of Bengal via the Myanmar into Mizoram in the northeastern states of India. So that is why these are important. Plus, India has been focusing on developing the India-Myanmar-Thailand Trilateral Highway because Myanmar can act as a gateway to the Southeast Asian nations. So this brings us to what is the importance of Myanmar for India. So if you look at the importance of Myanmar for India, Myanmar is key in linking South Asia to Southeast Asia, which can be clearly seen from the map of Myanmar, which links South Asia to Southeast Asia. Also, Myanmar is important because it stands at the confluence of India's Neighborhood First policy and Act East policy. Also, connectivity projects to Myanmar will help India in overcoming its chicken neck dilemma or the Siliguri corridor, which is a narrow corridor that connects the northeastern states of India with the mainland territory of India. Also, Myanmar is crucial for security and development of the northeastern states. So these are few highlights of the importance of the Myanmar for India and how India has been pursuing its foreign policy towards Myanmar. With this, let's take up the next news article now. This article on page number 13 is related to a new initiative that has been started by China, and that is named as the Global Security Initiative. In this regard, this initiative has been started by the China as a counter to Quad and AUKUS in the Indo-Pacific region. Now, the details of the Global Security Initiative are yet to be released by China. However, from our preliminary examination perspective, we should be aware that the Global Security Initiative, sometimes seen in the news, is an initiative of China that can be an important aspect for us from the prelims examination perspective. With this, let's take up the next news article now. Now, besides the articles that we have discussed in today's discussion, there are few articles that were covered previously in the DNS videos. For example, this article on page number 1 is related to Armed Force Special Powers Act, and this has been discussed in detail in the DNS of 23rd February 2022. So a link for this video will be provided in today's description. Second article on page number 1 that is important is related to the 5G services, and the 5G technology has been discussed in detail in the DNS of 25th September 2021. So a link for this video will also be provided in today's description. With this, we conclude today's discussion, and this is the question for the day.